Lesson 37. What makes you a good person? We're going to be looking at one of the oddest stories of Jesus' life from Mark chapter 7. It took place over a meal. He's eating with his disciples. And remember, eating is not just for nourishment, it is for affiliation, association, affirmation. And the Pharisees are noticing that the disciples don't wash their hands, which that has nothing to do with sanitation. They knew nothing about germs yet. That would be invented centuries later. Rather, it is for ritual cleansing. It's what we would think of as cooties. If you've been around Gentiles, they could defile you, and so you need to wash your hands. And they had a specific way that they were to wash their hands, with at least half an eggshell worth of water, fingers pointing down, so you wash off the cooties. But if you had been in a place where you knew Gentiles were, or could have been, like the marketplace, you had to wash twice. The first with your fingers pointing up, and you pour the water, and then it gets down to your wrist, and then you point down and wash that off, because you don't want the cooties washing up your sleeve, and then when you eat, it comes back out onto the food and into your body. Now you think, oh, that's ridiculous. Maybe so. But in their mind, it was very real. And so in verse 5, the Pharisees, they protest. And the Pharisees and the scribes ask him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" And Jesus' response is actually pretty aggressive. Listen to how he responds. This isn't even gentle. And he said to them, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. You leave the commandment of God and hold to the traditions of men." Now, there actually was an important point of what the Pharisees and scribes were teaching, and it's called the hedge about the law. The idea is similar to when you go to the Grand Canyon. There is a railing there. Now, beyond the railing is not the abyss. It's, you have several feet, so if a kid climbs up on the rail, falls over it, they're still okay. You move the fence back. And that was the idea with hand washing. If you will wash your hands, then you're going to be aware of when you're around Gentiles. And if you're aware of when you're around Gentiles, you will limit your impact of the Gentiles on your life. And if you limit the impact of the Gentiles on your life, then you won't be drawn into their lifestyle. It's similar to what people say about, say, dancing. When I was growing up, you're not supposed to dance. Why? Because that could lead to sex. Or you're not supposed to have a beer. Why? Because that could lead to drunkenness. It's not the act itself, it's what it could lead to that religious people protest about. And Jesus is saying that this is really interesting. You guys you're building these hedges about the law, your traditions. Your traditions are fences to keep people safe. Okay, I get that. But you are violating the very command of God, and yet building fences around other commands that you don't want to keep. And they said, excuse me? What are you talking about? And Jesus said, well, let me just give you an example. The greatest command is really the only command with a promise, is to honor your father and your mother. Yet according to their traditions, they had this thing called korban. Korban was, when I devote something to God, I cannot give it to you. Now that sounds good, but here's how it was used. I don't want to support my parents in their old age. So rather than giving them a house that I own, I devote the house to God. And I can have a vacation home that my parents can't take from me. They can't use it, but I can use it until I die, and then it's given to God. And Jesus is saying, you are hypocrites. That created quite a controversy, because Jesus was now confronting head on, and not gently, the leaders that they had looked up to all their lives. And so the people began asking Jesus, like, what is the meaning of this controversy? And he said to them, listen, it's not what goes into your body that defiles you. It's what comes out of your body. Sexual immoralities, slander, deceit, lies. That's what defiles you. And they go back into the house, and even the disciples are thrown by this. And you would have been too. If the leaders you looked up to as your spiritual mentors all your life are now at odds with the one you call Messiah, that throws you. They don't know the half of it. Listen to what Jesus says to his own disciples. Are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not into his heart, but his stomach, and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean. Now, Mark is making this subtle statement, it's like a parenthetical statement. He declared all foods clean. Why? Because the very rule of hand washing was to keep you away from the people who needed God the most. And if you fast forward to Acts chapter 10 and 11, the first Gentile convert, a centurion named Cornelius, the issue on the table was what was on the table. Peter has a vision that comes down from heaven, sheets with all kinds of animals, and God said, arise, kill and eat. Peter said, no, I would never. I'm kosher. And God tells him 3 times. And finally, Peter awakes from this vision and says, oh my goodness, God is telling me to stop calling unclean what he has called clean. And we're not talking about table scraps. We're talking about people made in his image. And we, as the people of God, have to be extremely careful that we don't call unclean what God has called clean. There are people that we label as unclean for various reasons. And some of them have good motives. I understand that. But the priority of God is people, not table scraps. It's people above morality. And your association with other people will not make you clean, because remember Jesus' principle from an earlier lesson: cleanness is more contagious than uncleanness. And when we start living that way, our tables will be open to all sorts and sundry, and God will be pleased.